What's up? What's up? What's up? What's going down on Capitol Hill? These motherfuckers out here clowning. Let me let me go ahead and see who's gonna pop up in my chat today because I'm about to get this party started and let me find what I need to find. Give me just a second. Sheila Jackson Lee, rep of Texas. So the Senate has took back the Democrats took back the Senate. Let me see, it's NBC News. What we want? NBC News, CNN News, ABC News. Somebody told me I need a news channel who's all up in that shit.
Actually exercise that power the way our Constitution says that they should be able to. So you're looking at some of it here. I mean, I never thought I would see anything like this. Coming from what your last guest was just talking about, a threat from the inside, the former Homeland Security Secretary. This wasn't an outside attack. So yes, there are still questions. We know that their members are still huddling in these undisclosed locations and trying to figure out how to proceed. Senators actually have the Electoral College votes with them in this undisclosed location. I'm told that a Senate staffer actually was the one who thought to grab them. And remember, this is a pretty old, arcane process, the counting of the Electoral College votes. And think back to when they would have put this law in place. I mean, Pete Williams called it the oldest, one of the oldest functions of our government. They would have been bringing these certificates from across the country on horseback. They would have been concerned about whether the people charged with getting them to the right place were able to survive their journeys. I know it may sound dramatic, but that was the circumstances that they were dealing with. And it's part of why the law is written to send several copies of these certificates out there. But what it means is that those physical items are imbued with very important characteristics, right? They come here, they open, this is what Congress is supposed to do. They open the envelopes, they read the numbers, they figure out what they say, and they put down the official tally. And yes, we don't necessarily need to do it that way now in the age of the internet, but that's how we do it here in the country. So the physical manifestation of those is very important, and somebody just grabbed them on the way out and took them to this secure location, Savannah.
Well, that I think that's actually quite poignant, Casey. I mean, it's not just a matter of ceremony, or in some ways it is, but at this really dark moment in our country, it calls into mind our history, and that this democracy, this only few hundred years old, is fragile, as we've heard many of our leaders say today. And that notion of somebody just grabbing those electoral votes, which of course represent the will of the people and the voters who came and exercised their precious right to vote. It actually, I think it really puts things into sharp relief at this extraordinary moment in our country. And Casey, honestly, there are probably folks tuning in here who are just living their lives. We're in the midst of a pandemic. We have an actual crisis going on, a health crisis in our country. And now there's this crisis that did not have to happen. To catch people up who may have not been following this as closely as you do every day, this electoral college vote that was to take place today, there was no suspense about the outcome. The votes are in, they've been certified, the legal challenges have been mounted, they've been rejected, recounts have been requested, the recounts have happened, the audits have happened. All of the legal remedies that could be exercised had been exercised, and this was supposed to be just the final moment where it's almost like a rubber stamp, where the electoral votes are read and certified, and then in 2 weeks we have an inauguration. Bring us up to date on what a core of Republicans were trying to do today and what the ramifications of that are.
Savannah, as the morning unfolded, I came into the Capitol as usual, and there were some protesters around, but frankly, protesting is a pretty common thing here in Washington. I've seen a lot of it. It's not usually an issue. It didn't seem abnormal or out of the ordinary. But the process that was about to be undertaken here today was from the start of the day historic. We were expecting to see and did see an objection to the counting of the Electoral College votes. And normally this only takes about a half an hour. This is, I believe, the fourth one of these that I've been up here for. It's the first one I even really remember, although I remember seeing the mahogany boxes go by in past election cycles. But of course, President Trump had urged his supporters to question the integrity of the election, to try and fight back. Stop the steal is the phrase that they have been using. And while everything got off to what seemed like a normal start here in the building, the objection was made. The way the process works, all members of Congress were together in a joint session. Once the objection was made, they were to separate to their respective chambers. This is all laid out very carefully in the law. Each chamber was to debate for 2 hours this objection and then take a vote on whether or not these Electoral College votes were properly cast and should be counted. And we know that there were Republicans, many of them prepared to vote that no, those electoral votes should not be counted. However, Mitch McConnell actually opened the debate on the Senate floor by saying that it was time to put this all behind us, that if in fact they continued with the objection to the counting of the votes, to certifying President-elect Joe Biden as the president, that our country would end up in a death spiral. That was the phrase that he used. Our democracy would end up in a death spiral. And just moments later, we saw protesters, rioters rushing the Capitol, eventually breaching both the House and Senate floors, now leaving us with lawmakers in hiding, unable to conduct the business of the country, and an uncertain outcome in terms of how law enforcement is going to finally put an end to all of this. Savannah.
All right, Casey, thank you. Let's take a pause.
Y'all gonna put an end to this. Y'all better do it right tonight. You're gonna put an end to this shit for real.
Meet the press to carry it on. We'll check back in with you, Chuck, in just a couple of moments. I'll send it to you.
All righty. Thank you, Savannah. Let's go now down to Vaughn Hilliard. He's on the west side of the Capitol. Vaughn, paint a picture for us.
They better do this shit right.
What's going on?
We're looking at 6 p.m. first day. Essentially,
Vaughn, it is. Yeah, Vaughn, we hear you. I know you're talking. We got tough audio, and this has been tough all day. I get that. Let's. Why don't we see if we can fix that? Let me go to Yasmin Vasugian, if we can. If Yasmin. Actually, let me move there. Let's go to Igor Bobak. He's Igor Bobak at the Huffington Post. And if you've been on Twitter and seen some of the first early pictures of what was going on inside the Capitol, it was courtesy of pictures from Igor Bobak. So, Igor, you were there in the first moments when this breach, it appears, occurred. Take me through the scene there when it all first started to happen.
Thanks, Chuck. Well, I was in the middle of reporting on today's certification vote for the 2020 election when I heard a commotion, I heard yelling, and I ran down to the first floor of the Senate where I encountered, I was stunned to encounter a group of protesters trying to make their way up the steps into the Senate, to the second floor of the Senate. And I saw this police officer courageously try to hold them off with nothing but a baton, but was ultimately unable to do so. And the protesters chased them up the steps where there was a sort of a standoff, and right steps away from the Senate floor. These protesters were carrying Confederate flags. They were yelling traitors. They were saying that, they needed to stop this from happening in order to make Trump president. Really just shocking scenes. At one point, a few of them got into the Senate chamber itself and got up to the day where Mike Pence was presiding minutes earlier to take photos and to scream that this was Donald Trump's election. It's really stunning scenes.
Igor, I'm seeing you caught some pictures. There clearly is some Capitol Police that was there at the time. Were they aggressively trying to push them back, or did they feel overwhelmed, or what could you observe at the time? How are the Capitol Police handling what they had? Were they just overwhelmed?
I think initially they were overwhelmed and unaware, frankly, some of them, that protesters had gotten into the Capitol. I took this video of this lone police officer trying to hold back this group of 15 to 20 protesters, and finally receive the backup yelling that, they've gotten in. When he did receive backup, they tried to de-escalate the situation, tried to talk to them to calm them down, but ultimately they would not leave, and eventually roamed across the Capitol into the rotunda and into the Senate chamber itself.
Igor, are you safe? Where are you right now?
I am safe, thank you. I'm at a secure location. I'm outside the Capitol. I'm holding here, and we're all trying to see what comes next tonight.
Well, Igor Bobak, thanks for sharing your photos with the world, getting us these photos. There's a lot more we need to unpack with this. You stay safe. And of course, thank you for your brave reporting. Let me bring in Hakeem Jeffries. He's a member of the Democratic leadership, Democrat from New York. And Congressman, we got a report that you and Congresswoman Liz Cheney had been sort of reassuring the leadership and reassuring members that this process is going to go forward, that these terrorists are not going to stop, if you will, this process. Do you have an idea of when the Capitol is going to be safe for your return? Congressman Hakeem Jeffries, are you with us, sir? It's my understanding we have you on the phone. Can you hear us? There we go. Congressman. Okay. Well, let me check in here with Hallie Jackson and see what we're hearing inside this West Wing right now. Hallie, is anybody getting through to the president?
They let him in.
Well, I think the clearest evidence that at least the president did something, and there will be a lot of discussion of what that something was that taped message that we heard from him just within the last maybe hour or so. Clearly, there had been people coalescing around the president. His allies were very public about this. Even some of his closest Republican allies very publicly on other networks, on Twitter, were saying, you have got to say something. Some of the most forceful comments came from the president's former communications director, a senior official inside the White House, inside the West Wing. Her name is Alyssa Farah. Chuck, her name might be familiar to Beltway insiders. She used to work for Mark Meadows, who then became the chief of staff. And she issued this sort of impassioned plea saying to MAGA country, I am one of you, and this is not okay. This has to stop. You have to go home. The president has to speak up about this. We obviously heard that statement from him that, said, sure, go home. But in the next breath said, we love you. You're special. I understand you're hurt. This election was stolen. It, of course, was not stolen. This is a crisis point for President Trump. He has now cleared the sort of bar of speaking publicly, right? The bar that was sort of set by his allies, by people like President-elect Joe Biden. But this is a president, Chuck, as you know, who is defiant as a personal defining characteristic and trait of his, right? And so what does he see? And importantly, Chuck, what is he hearing in the coverage of what he's seeing? This is a president who is at times and rather frequently influenced by some of what he hears in media from, for example, media allies. And so that is something, the president, he is very visual. He watches television. That's what he's doing now and how he's getting this images. We have our White House team reaching out, obviously working sources. What's he being briefed on? What's happening? We heard from the press secretary when the National Guard was activated. I think in the eyes of some critics, that took a little too long. Right? We were watching these images for a while before it became clear that the National Guard would be going in. But now it seems like there's a little bit more action. There's a little bit more movement. But I have to tell you, it's getting dark in D.C. This is a point where law enforcement has to get a handle on what's happening here. And then there's a question of what the actual process is, Chuck. The whole process we were talking about, the Electoral College count, moving forward. How does that unfold? I've talked to another source on the Republican side whose hope was that some of these Republican senators specifically who had objections would perhaps think twice before doing that and before pursuing that, given what we've seen unfold.
I would think that at least Mitch McConnell is going to attempt to have that conversation with Mr. Hawley and probably Mr. Cruz, among others. I think we have Vaughn Hilliard's connection now better for us. And Vaughn, Hallie just brought up an important point. The sun is setting. The sun essentially has set in Washington, D.C., Vaughn. What do you see out there? And do you feel the law enforcement presence yet?
Wow. Wow. I'm looking at these pictures they showing.
It hasn't really, there hasn't been a serious effort except for the last 15 minutes here. We are just a half hour away from the curfew here in Washington, D.C., and you can see some of the lights flashing up towards the Capitol. It was just about 15 minutes ago, Chuck, that the first tear gas was dispensed. You've seen flashbang grenades over the course of these last hours. What you saw were thousands of individuals as this insurrection took place here at the United States Capitol watching. You can see over to my left, our great photographer, Paul Rigney, is behind the camera here. And this is what you've seen here over the course of the last 15 minutes. It's a systematic push to push people away here from the scene. You saw Capitol Police work their way down and pick individuals up one at a time physically from their seats up on what is the inaugural platform. That platform is typically not there. Right. It's just been constructed in the last weeks. That is where members of Congress, former presidents, members of the president's family sit during the swearing in of the president of the United States. This is where Joe Biden should be sworn in just 2 weeks from now. But what you have seen over the course of these last hours is thousands of people.
I need to go to ABC because I like these pictures they are showing. And this motherfuckers right here ain't showing me shit. They showing some shit earlier. Fuck that. I need to see what's going on right now.
Came up to me right before we went live to you. He said, if our voices are
so
not
let me
today,
see something.
You'll hear our muskets tomorrow. Again, there is no police presence outside of the Capitol Police that you see up literally on the steps of the Capitol.
I'll be around.
Whoa, Susan.
Oh, I'm looking for coupon codes.
Well, Capital One Shopping instantly searches for available coupon codes and automatically applies them.
Save me some cheddar.
Crime scene in America, but according to Manchin, they want to stay tonight and make sure. I guess they do right by this.
Okay,
I had to switch out to ABC News because they were showing me some wild ass pictures
as well. Let me go back to is Ben Siegel with us at the Capitol right now, Mark? Let me bring in Ben Siegel. What more can you tell us about what you're hearing from your sources there inside the Capitol, the situation as night has fallen, as we see this perimeter being formed around the Capitol?
George, I'm talking to Democrats and Republicans in the House, and it's their expectation, like their colleagues in the Senate, that they continue this business, that they continue this joint session of Congress to certify the election results. Typically, they would go back and resume the sessions regarding the debate over the electorate from Arizona. But they want this to happen. They want to get this done. This is their responsibility, but it's just not clear how quickly this can happen. I was talking to one House Republican leadership aide who said they have to go and make sure that the floor is safe and they have to clear everything up. You know, there's broken glass everywhere. There's furniture that was put in front of the door to prevent people from coming in. Gas masks probably still on the floor. There's that work that has to get done in addition to securing the Capitol. You know, people who work on Capitol Hill always joke about it being sort of like a village and almost like Hogwarts from the Harry Potter universe. This is a bunch of buildings with underground tunnels, tons of entrances, exits. It's going to take a really long time to make sure that the campus is safe and secure, and that there aren't still people, elements who want to disrupt the process in the building. So rank and file members, leadership aides still do not know when they will move forward on this. They are
they didn't bring the dogs today.
In these interviews, but it's just not clear at this time when that will happen.
Take another minute on that, Ben, because I think you hit on a very important point right there. We see the Capitol right there. There are 3 House buildings on Independence Avenue side, 3 Senate buildings on the Constitution Avenue side, the Library of Congress and the Supreme Court further up the street. And what most people don't understand in this is that everything you see above ground is matched by an entire warren of offices and tunnels below ground.
That's right. It's basically like a human anthill where the business of the country and the politics get done. Almost every building is connected through multiple tunnels. The members of Congress use these buildings, use these tunnels to get to and from votes during the winter, during inclement weather. They were actually instructed to use these tunnels today because of protests. Ironically enough, and you know, this is tens of thousands of people work here every day when there's not a pandemic, and there are just so many ways in and out of the building if you're somebody who's protesting and trying to get in there, trying to disrupt this process. It takes a lot of people to secure the facility and all the entrances and all these different buildings, the 3 or 4 House office buildings, and the Library of Congress buildings, and then the 3 Senate buildings on the other side of the building. And, one thing that I was struck by watching some of these images coming in from the Capitol and some of these really frightening scenes of people breaching the Capitol, for the first time in hundreds of years, people making it through the Capitol and occupying it. There are hallways and places in the Capitol that you pass on your walks every day to and from getting coffee, to or from your desk, that are really unremarkable. It's a window that's locked on both sides that looks out to the Washington Monument that you really can't get access or use. Sort of these hallways that are locked off for security reasons that don't really lead anywhere. And today, these images were just so striking. You had almost all these windows were broken and people were trying to swarm in. And it was almost as if they did not have enough Capitol Police officers to deal with anything. It's almost remarkable in one sense that we've only heard of just sort of a handful of instances of gunshots and maybe 1 or 2 injuries from protesters. I'm surprised it's not actually more, quite frankly. So they really have a tall order ahead of them trying to secure this whole facility and also make sure that it's protected so that the members of Congress, the more than 500 members of Congress, can go back to doing their work in both chambers. And then also, we're not even talking about the inauguration. That's going to be another gargantuan task to secure and protect, because everything you're seeing everywhere on the west front of the Capitol facing the Washington Monument, where you're seeing protesters fan out and they're not even being pushed back from some of these places. That's still the grounds of the Capitol. That's where the members of Congress might even be sitting when Joe Biden takes the oath of office. So they have to really figure out how to not just secure the Capitol, but expand that perimeter and get it in a position where they can actually continue preparing for the inauguration, which is only happening in a couple of weeks.
Ben, you spend most of your days up there on Capitol Hill. You deal with these hundreds, thousands of staffers, most of them young.
I mean,
in the Capitol. As you
the
spoke with
curfew
everyone
starts
today,
within
how would you
24
describe
minutes, so they ain't
what
going
were
nowhere. Look
feeling,
at them, ain't
what
going
their state
nowhere.
of mind was as this was all unfolding?
It's a real mix of fear and apprehension and disappointment. Throughout our broadcast, we keep saying, Joe Biden said the siege of the Capitol, and it's almost unbelievable to hear that the seat of American democracy in this country, which is respected and admired from all around the world. People come here from all around the country and the world to work to try to make this country better. To see it, vandalized and broken into and desecrated, it's not something that anybody who ever comes to work here every day, would really expect to happen in this country and really anywhere. And it's just such a magical place where again, people have their differences and they have their disagreements, but there is still comedy. There is still a sense of we're all in this together. We're all trying to make the country better when you talk to Republicans and Democrats, and for that matter, reporters up there who want people to understand what's happening in their government and how the Congress functions. And you always see something new in the Congress. You always see a new detail, a new statue, a new historical figure. You can get lost in the building, just soaking in the history and everything that's happened there. And the fact that we're seeing something now that's never played out in American history. I think people from college graduates to the grizzled veterans and people who have been up on the Hill for decades are it's disappointment really and just sadness across the spectrum.
Thank you, Ben. Mary Alice Parks, let me bring you in on this as well. As Ben was talking, I was thinking back to my early days on Capitol. That's what was always so special about the Capitol. It truly is the people's house. People walk through it all day long. Members of Congress speak with their constituents all day long. Staffers going back and forth. All of that put to a stop today. I know you've been speaking with many of them as well. What are you hearing?
Yeah, and they're doing the people's business, but they're humans themselves. I mean, the texts that I've had today have been from young staffers who are hiding in closets, texts that we normally get during mass shootings. I've had texts from staffers who are trying to make sure that their bosses are okay. Bosses, members of Congress who are huddled in other members' offices trying to shelter in place. I was texting with one colleague at one point today who didn't want to tell me where they were or speak loudly on the phone because they were worried they might be heard by some of these, we're not even sure what to call them anymore, these anarchist protesters, terrorists in the hallway. They didn't want to speak speak too loudly because they were nervous about whether they would be revealing their location. I mean, just the amount of fear and anxiety on a human level that I think we shouldn't lose today. But, you know, I just also want to take a moment. I was really rattled when Jonathan Greenblatt, who you had on just a little bit ago, he kept referring to the Civil War, and he was not using that imagery lightly. You know, I was thinking about the fact that just 2 weeks ago, we had President Trump veto a very popular bipartisan spending bill, partly on grounds that he didn't want military bases to be renamed for Confederate names to be overturned. And we had this morning Mike Pence referring back to a time in our history right after the Civil War, when the country was trying to piece itself together and had to reinvent these rules around the Electoral College. You just have this feeling today that we are seeing images that harken back to a time of civil war that I never thought in my lifetime we would be seeing or having to even have a conversation about again.
On that point, one of the most striking images of the day, I don't know if we have it, Mark, but that image of one of the protesters walking through Statuary Hall in the Capitol, a Confederate flag over his shoulder in the Capitol of the United States. Mary Alice, thank you. I want to bring in Congressman Ken Buck, Republican of Colorado, also former law enforcement officer. I know you were on the floor as this all unfolded. Congressman, I'm glad you're safe. Tell us what you saw.
Hello?
Hi, Congressman.
Yes.
Hi, I just want to thank you for joining us. I was saying I'm glad you're safe. Tell us what you saw as this all unfolded on the House floor earlier this afternoon.
Well, I was one of the speakers, and so I was on the House floor. The first thing that happened was plainclothes Capitol officers came in and escorted the speaker from the chair. We resumed debate at that point. We were informed soon after that the House, that the Capitol building had been breached. About 10 minutes after that, we were advised to reach under our chairs to grab a gas mask and put a gas mask on because tear gas had been deployed in the Capitol. About 10, 15 minutes after that, we could start hearing the doors being banged on, and it appeared that people were trying to breach the House floor itself. So we, a group of us, grabbed some of the heavy furniture, credenzas and whatnot, and moved it in front of the doors to try to prevent that from happening.